Welcome you all to this fourth lecture of the 10th week concerning history of Arabic literature. The rise of novel and blank verse in some perspectives are the topics of deliberation. Regarding blank verse, we have already seen many things that it actually goes against what has been recorded by history, what has been standing as a standard version of poetry in Arabic in the classical times. Especially in regard to Arabic, the domain of poetry, the concept of poetry was inseparable from the blank, from the specific rhyming patterns which are known as al-awzan. Al-awzan wal-qawafi. So awzan and qawafi, the rhyming patterns, the meters, the poetic meters, rhyming meters, which are also known as the scansion system. So throughout history until the modern times, the concept of Arabic poetry was to be identified with strict adherence to specific awzan and qawafi. So it was like the classical tunes, the classical meters, standing as the standard versions, which cannot be violated, adherence to whom can never be violated. If there is any violation, it would be constituting a gray zone, some points of weakness. So any point of departure from these traditional or the standard lines of the rules of a scansion system, which are also known as al-awzan al-khaliliya. They are also known as al-awzan al-khaliliya. So here we find something like an area where the person, the reader, is confused in relation to the concept of poetry and how this can be seen, can be located in the context of time. So during the Middle Ages, poetry was not made for, we can simply say like that. It was a standard. It was standardized, both in terms of concepts. So concepts were standardized, and the parameters of expression were too standardized. What were the concepts, or the domains, or the themes, the motifs? They were all standardized, and they hardly touched upon the actual issues of the common folk in society. So it was, we can say, it was very much like it was very much based on class consciousness. We can say it was elitist in its nature. Elitist. It was idealist. It was elitist in its nature. إن التجربة الشعرية في العصر الجاهلي والتصور الشعري في العصر الجاهلي وفي العصر الكلاسيكية، إن هذا التصور كان في الحقيقة لم يكن يتمثل في الشعب، في الشعبية. لم يكن يصور أصوات الشعب، إنه لم يكن للعامة وإنما كان للخاصة. فالأوزان تصور الوزن، يعني بشكل معياري، الوزن بشكل معياري. هذا الشكل المعياري الذي ورد إلينا من الزمن القديم، ولا نملك أي حرية وفق هذا المعطى. وفق هذه النظرية لا نملك أي حرية في أن نتخلى عنها أو نخالفها. إذن لا مجال للمخالفة أو التخلي عنها، وإلا فالكلام لا يكون شعرا. يعني معادلة بسيطة جدا، المعادلة بسيطة، هذا لا يكون شعر. الشعر هو الكلام الموزون المقفى. النقطة هناك أن هذا المعيارية في الحقيقة نخبوية، هي قضية نخبوية، مشروع نخبوي. It's something like elitist. That's why it goes against the modern standard, modern concept of language. According to the modern, as per the modern concept of language, language is what we find, what we have in a human society. It is produced by humans. It stands for human lives, for human roles, for the historical position, for the historical situation we have in some specific geographical locations. So it is purely human. It's a sociological phenomenon, human sociological phenomenon. It is not metaphysical. It is not very much theological. So nature of language cannot be dealt with in terms of theological interpretations or theological adherences or preferences. But when we take into account the concept of mi'yariya or standard, both in terms of language as well as the contents to deliberate upon, here we'll be finding that this is very much Nukhwawi or class conscious, which can be seen in some perspectives to be elitist or based on some elitist preferences or affiliation. This is the one thing. The second thing is that, which again is significant, that even in the classical times, there were some deviations. There were some deviations from these standard qawafi and awzan in the domain of poetry. We have seen that during the Abbasid times, there were certain poetic genre, like al-rubaiyat, in Arabic, of course, in Arabic. Before that, we don't find rubai in Arabic because this genre had flourished in Persia. It was Persian. Rubaiyat, al-khumasiyat, specific type of things, khumasiyat. Al-mulamma'at, combining between different languages, two languages, Arabic, Persian, and so on. Al-mulamma'at, ala ayyuha الساقي درك وناولها كإشغاص نمود أول ولي افتاد مشكلة by Khwaja Hafiz Shirazi, and many other examples. So ملمعات. In Spain we had Andalusia, we had muashahat, again of some different nature, because here the structure was different. It was a little bit different, where we had the samt and the qufl, dawr, and very specific structure, which was adhered to by the poets. The first thing. The second thing is that in this sequence we must recollect that sometimes the makhraj or the qufl was composed in another language, so it was bilingual. So it had its specific structure, the rhyming pattern, and alongside being bilingual. So here bilingual, this is another example of bilinguality in Arabic poetry. So muashahat and asjal in vernacular, totally in vernacular, not a standard language. So these were some of the deviations we have. During the Ottoman times, there were far more deviations, innovations. The thing like the Ashair al-Handasi, the poetry having the patterns of engineering patterns. Uh, it's also known as Ashir al-Basri. Ashir al-Basri. Tughrai system, share in Tughrai system. Tughra, share poetry being written in form of say some images, producing some images, primarily images of the non-living beings according to the Islamic theological injections. But again, sometimes we find it like the depiction of or writing a sentence, a specific sentence, to produce an image of an animal, lion, for example. So these sort of things, alongside different sanaya, like use of undotted letters in all the qasida, in poetry, also in prose. In prose, we'll be having so many examples. Sawatul Ilham by Abul Fadl Faydi al-Allami. It's a very significant examples. Ibn Sana al-Mulk is credited with many examples of these sanaya and badaya used in poetry. Or the poetry, like whether or not you'll be whether you'll be reading it from right to left or from left to right, the outcome is the same, the text is the same, just like this text, although it is only one example from the Holy Quran. Rabbaka fakabbir, right to left, Rabbaka fakabbir, left to right, Rabbaka fakabbir. The entire qasida like that. Or the entire qasida being based on san'at manquta. Each and every letter is dotted. Either each and every letter is undotted, or each and every letter is dotted. So these sorts of Ash'ar al-Handasi, Ash'ar al-Suri, which we have in abundance during the Ottoman period, chiefly Ottoman period. So there were these deviations. And of course, in modern times, in 20th century, we do have, under the Western influence, we have the emergence of blank verse in Arabic, Ash'ar al-Hur, the free verse or blank verse in Arabic. Then it might one may simply ask, what is the difference between the two? There were some deviations in past, in early Muslim history, Arab history. Now you have some other deviations. And so what's the difference between the two? The difference lies in many things. Primarily, what is of primary concern, importance, is the ratio, is the size, the bulk of poetry being composed in free rhymes. So it's a huge quantity. Sometimes it seems to be like the fashion, the vogue, the poetic vogue in modern times. So this is the first thing. So in the Middle Ages, in Abbasid times, or the Ottoman period, in cases of Muashahat and Ashjal and Ash'ar al-Handasi, al-Mulamma'at, Rubaiyat, Khumasiyat, etc. There were some offbeat examples. They were not the tradition. They didn't constitute some literary traditions. There were some examples. Of course, these examples were significant. We'll be having a number of poets, sometimes very noted poets, composing poems in these lines. But they didn't set a trend, a literary trend, a literary tradition. It didn't turn itself into a poetic institution, as the case is in modern times. So this is the primary difference between the two. And the result is that in modern times, the large chunk of poetry we find it composed in free verse. Only finding some very prominent writers, sometimes the elders, who still adhere to the Al-Awzan al-Khaliliya. But majority of the poets we have in modern times, majority of them have preferred free verse over the classical rhyming patterns in the domain of poetry. Although you're finding some of them combining between the two. So they compose the classical, the verses in classical tunes, in classical rhyming patterns, and sometimes they compose, they versify, they compose lines, poems in free verse. So they combine between the two. But some of them, a generation is there that is hardly capable. It may be projected as like this. It may be said like this. They're hardly able to compose poetry on the classical rhyming patterns. So, fa'ulun, fa'ilun, mustaf'ilun, fa'ilat, it's not as simple to deal with. This actually goes to several reasons. It's because of several reasons. The first is that there has been something like a trend in modern times. So the trend is that the versification should be simple. It should be as simple as life has become simple in modern times. Life is not complicated. It is not elitist. It is not traditional. It is not idealist. Rather, it is pragmatic. So this is the primary reason. Life is pragmatic. Therefore, language is pragmatic. The awzan are pragmatic. The poetic preferences, structural preferences, alongside the thematic preferences are pragmatic. So nothing, there's nothing like canonical, which cannot be violated. So this is the first thing. That is, this is in accordance to the zest of time, to the spirit of time. The first thing. The second thing is that, of course, this is realistic again, I must say. And this is a question you can ponder about, you can think about. Sometimes I think that the modern generation of even the native speakers of Arabic or in any other language, it's not limited to Arabic. When it comes to the poetic refinement, poetic virtuosity, poetic ability, that is very much essential in this very business of poetic enterprise. The grip over language, the grip over the command over these artistic aspects of balagha, figures of speech, scansion system, rhetoric, prosody, because there are certain aspects of prosody, especially in regard to zihaf, illat, etc. The variations will be having of a standard wazan, like fu'ulun. In all the cases, it's not fu'ulun. Sometimes it becomes fu'ul, sometimes it becomes fu'ul, sometimes it becomes fu'ur. So there are the variations, and these variations are discussed under certain rules and regulations in under many captions, whether it is zihaf or ilal, etc. The names of the buhur, their standard scansion patterns, rules involved in them, alongside choice of standard words, which in modern parlance might be a little bit difficult. where a person who wants to compose poetry on any theme of his choice, if he prefers, if he decides to compose the poem on the pattern of the classicist, the classical patterns, it would be a quite challenging task for him, because in this sequence he'll be having to he'll have to have access knowledge, deep knowledge of the classical language, literature, words, phrases, idioms, tashbihat, isti'arat, kinayat, etc. All these figures of speech, in order to depict, in order to express his emotions, in order to compose lines as at par with the classical standards. So it's really difficult. Practically, it is difficult, because especially when we find that we'll be finding that prosody as such is not a subject which is taught in all the universities, in all the courses, in all the syllabi. Sometimes it has been, it happens, it is part of the syllabi, sometimes it is not. So in a nutshell, we're finding that when it comes to the poetic culture, al-thaqafa shi'riya, we'll be finding, we can notice that this al-thaqafa shi'riya, or this poetic culture, in modern parlances, has become, unfortunately, alien or strange. A stranger, it stands a stranger to some of its own standards related to language and literature and poetry. These aspects have been deliberated upon in a series of scholarly works and studies, like Ashir al-Hur, Nashatuhu wa Waqi'uhu, Mustaqbalun by Abdul Hamid al-Duha, Ashir al-Iraqi, Ashir al-Hur fi al-Iraq, the free verse in Iraq, and Izzat as-Sayyid Ahmed writing this book, Inhiyar Ashir al-Hur, the collapse of the free verse, collapse of free verse. Because if the free verse is devoid of, sometimes what actually plays havoc with the very scheme of poetry, whether it is classical or whether it is modern or postmodern, whether it is the classical poetry as per the classical norms of scansion system, or it is the free verse as per the modern parlances, in modern parlances. The free verse is acceptable. It holds the ground firmly. It captures our attention. It might captivate us in terms of charm, captivate our mind and taste in terms of time. Only if it has some uniqueness to offer, uniqueness of idea, veracity, the literary taste, something new, is something unique, something substantial, genuine, is subject of the poetic deliberation, whether in classical parlances or the modern parlances. If there is any shortfall of this, if there is any gray area, if there is any disturbance in this balance, then it will be simply some pieces of text. Some text is stretched out of some words, because the composer doesn't have, the poet doesn't have the ability to compose a standard Arabic poetry on a standard, where the theme is a standard and the parameters are, the structures are, the meters are standard. So in absence of something genuine, something really poetic, of course, poetry doesn't mean it must be based on the classical scansion system, but it must be genuine. It must be powerful. It must be beautiful. The idea must be beautiful. the image must be beautiful. This image, this idea, when it is genuine, when it is beautiful, when it is not devoid of any meaningness, then it's simply a common thing, my stuff, which that might not deserve any considerations on our part. So with this, we are concluding this lecture. Thank you.